It's Sunday, 22nd December 2024, a few days from the day on which we celebrate Christmas. Today also marks the 22nd anniversary of the death of former President Hugh Desmond Hoyt, who was also Prime Minister of Guyana and leader of the People's National Congress Reform. We salute the fallen hero and we celebrate his legacy in our everyday lives. Today, we will look at a number of very topical issues, and my special guest today is leader of the People's National Congress Reform and leader of the parliamentary opposition, Aubrey Norton, Member of Parliament. So Norton, welcome to Nation Watch and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, and a very good day to your listening and viewing audience.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, and I trust that you will, as usual, stay with us the entire course of the program. I know many people are very busy preparing for Christmas, and there's a tradition of breaking up and making up the house and making the pepper pot and so on early so that it's not fresh on Christmas Day. So grant us, please, your company for the next hour or so. Mr. Norton, a very vexing question for the people of Guyana is the appointment of Clifton Hicken as Commissioner of Police. Mr. Hicken, who is about 3 years past the official date of age of retirement and who has been performing the functions of Commissioner of Police, has been appointed, and from the evidence available in the public domain, in violation of the Constitution, in the absence of meaningful consultation with yourself as leader of the opposition. What's your position on this? And going forward, what are your intended steps or actions that you have in mind?
Well, I've already said that it's unlawful. True that I wasn't consulted. A letter was written to me. And in response to that letter, I pointed out that the police force was embroiled in corruption, and therefore what the government should be doing is investigating corruption before they talk anything about the appointment of a commissioner. He's way past the age and therefore should not be confirmed. I made the point that if a teacher arrives at the age of retirement and she is a deputy headmistress, you can't confirm her as headmistress after retirement. And so it's a clear violation of the Constitution, of the principles, of all the things that go with good governance. And that is why we have indicated we will take the matter to court so that we can have a decision of the court on this issue. Hicken, in my opinion, also should be dealt with for mismanaging the Guyana police force. The highest level of corruption ever in the history of the Guyana police force is occurring under Clifton Hicken. I don't think he's suitable at all to be commissioner. And that is apart from the other things he's accused of.
Apart from Hicken, there have been appointments of deputy commissioners of police. We are aware that when the last set of promotions were being considered under the AP and UFC, just before the transition from one administration to the next, a number of senior police officers were reportedly facing some investigations, criminal in some cases, departmental in others. And so had not satisfied the requirements for being considered for promotion. Then the transition, we know all the confusion that preceded the appointment of a new police service commission, which eventually appointed these people anyway. We have not heard or seen any report in the media that these people have been exonerated or that the investigations were in any way concluded. Yet some of these same senior officers have been now promoted to deputy commissioner. What does this mean for the Guyana Police Force, and what does it mean for national security of our country?
It compromises national security, but it has to be taken in context. You have a president who had 19 fraud charges and was not exonerated. What they did is use the power at their disposal to drop the charges, but there has been no exoneration. And if the government is complicit in corruption, then one anticipates that as far as the government is concerned, nothing is wrong with appointing some of the people they have appointed who are accused of corruption and other forms of malpractices. And so you have a situation where the Ghana Police Force is now governed by some people who are all of questionable character. Probably one or two in the bunch don't have some disciplinary matter pending. And so it's just a manifestation of the lawlessness of the People's Progressive Party.
And it's also manifesting itself in the wider society with the conduct of people, civilians and police officers.
And a total disrespect for law. There has been a total breakdown of law and order in Guyana, even at the level of traffic, of the traffic.
Let's talk a little bit about a non-appointment now. Non-appointment. When the People's Progressive Party demitted office in 2015, the sitting president was not in favor of appointing the two most senior judicial officers in this country. While in opposition, the leader of the opposition, Barrett Jagdeo, was not in agreement with President Granger as far as appointing the Chancellor and the Chief Justice is concerned. Now the People's Progressive Party is back in government with someone else wearing the cap of president. You have signaled both orally and in writing your agreement, your unequivocal agreement for the appointment of these two ladies to these positions. Mr. Ali, for his part, has said, we have not come to that point yet. When we come to that point, we'll deal with it. He's already almost former president, and he's not ready. Speak to us about these.
He had also falsely said that it will be dealt with once the Judicial Commission is in place, even though that couldn't happen, because that is not a case of the judicial appointment. It's a case of an agreement between the president and the opposition leader, and then they move forward. I believe that he has no intention of appointing the two persons. They have the design as to who they want there, and they will do everything to ensure that they don't appoint the two of them. I think the barrier that they face is that the opposition leader has to agree, and they can't get my agreement unless they come with.
You mean for alternative appointments?
Alternative appointment. They've already gotten my agreement for the appointment of the two that they're refusing to appoint. So I sense at some stage they will try and come with alternative names. I don't see how they're going to get agreement if they refuse to appoint two people who are qualified and served in the position. And that's the reality of the situation.
There's a bit of an irony here. You have contended that Hicken is not qualified, neither is he certified for the position. He has gone past the age of retirement, yet he has been appointed. Here are two eminently qualified jurists who've been acting for in excess of 20 years. At least one of them in excess of 20 years. And there's no consideration for appointment. What is wrong with the thinking of the People's Progressive Party when it comes to qualified, certified professionals? And how is their position going to continue to impact the judicial services?
Like I said today at the press conference, the PPP likes people who are compromised, who have violated the law. And once they are compromised and would have violated the law, then they have the swords of Damocles over their heads, and they can deal with them. In the case of the two young ladies we were talking about, I don't think they have that. And so they are worried that they can be independent and not have anything against them. Now, you just have to look and see the handling of the Brutus issue. The intention was never to charge Brutus. it is the public outcry that caused them to go down that road. And then what you have is a situation in which the public outcry was so heavy that they could not act. And so in the process, they would have acted, and they have generated more problems than they had before, because they're now in a situation where they had said 250,
252, 252 charges.
Now, I don't know how they're dealing with all of those, but clearly, Brutus' issue has shown clearly that the PPP is complicit in corruption, and that had they not been that outcry, there would have been no charges. And if I know the PPP, and I think I do, they are going to allow this to die away quietly. Hopefully the government will change by then, and the issue of corruption in the Guyana police force can be dealt with.
This whole business of the judiciary and the People's Progressive Party, a minister of government, as he then was, called for the defrocking of a judge because that judge did not produce an order favorable to the People's Progressive Party. We've had a former president, now leader of the PPP, criticizing judicial decisions. We have had the same former president interfering, as it were, with the work at the level of the magistrates' court when it comes to charges against citizens of Guyana relating to the last elections. Mr. Norton, there seemed to be no line separating the executive of this country at the moment under the People's Progressive Party from the judiciary. When it comes to interference from the executive, what's the solution outside of a change of government?
First, you have to recognize that the PPP believes in total political domination and control. And once they are in government, they are going to seek to control all and sundry, not just the judiciary. If they're going as far as seeking to control ordinary people in the government service through the installation of fear, then they are not at all disposed to independence of any institution. And you only have to look at how they undermine all the institutions. You had the elections, you had the procurement commission. They didn't establish it, we established it. They came to power, and now what they have done is to ensure that it doesn't function. The battle at present between the government and the opposition representative on the investment board, Mr. Campbell, is again a reflection of the fact that they believe in domination and control. And unless you change them by electoral means, or it arrive at the point where they have to be confronted in the streets of Guyana, there isn't going to be any change on the part of the PPP. They do not believe in democracy. They believe in total domination and control.
You mentioned Mr. Terence Campbell. The Terence Campbell revelation brings out a number of things. One of the sticking points here is the PPP's contempt for the private sector. Here's a former president who controls the sitting president saying, when Campbell been frying chicken, I been running a country. I mean, running a country to the ground on the one hand. But the disdain for Mr. Campbell, an entrepreneur, a person several times overqualified than Mr. Jagdeo himself, a person who provides employment, national service, and all these things to a country. There are some private sector entities that receive the support of the government as long as they are compliant. But here's Mr. Campbell for the first time speaking out about a national issue from a position of conviction about what is good for Guyana. And the insinuation that he's A, racist, that B, his businesses should be boycotted. Mr. Norton, what's happening here?
Barra Jack Deo is a despicable person. I sometimes, I have good friends who went to Patrice Lumumba University, and they are intelligent, could analyze. But every time I hear Barra Jack Deo, he comes over as somebody that didn't go to a respectable university. He comes over as a crass person who believes that he has the transport for Guyana and that nobody must challenge what he says, even though he is inept intellectually. I have never heard from Jack do an intellectual analysis of anything. The minute you challenge him at the level of intellect, he resorts to cussing out, abusing out. I would normally say lift up your frack and abuse. Now, Mr. Campbell has been appointed as the opposition rep on the investment committee that is supposed to be looking into and managing the investments as coming from oil resources. But even before that, the wider board that is supposed to be overseeing the oil and gas sector, the government has destroyed any hope of independence as it relates to that board. And so what you're seeing is really a dictatorial regime removing all the guardrails of democracy. And in fact, what you have in this country is an autocratic, if not dictatorial regime. And it is not restricted to the private sector. It is for anybody, even a child who pushed the finger up in the air. They are prepared to go after them and destroy them. Now, Barra Jack Deo, who in my opinion is a racist, and I don't say that lightly. I have never called anyone before a racist, but I'm saying this because I am privy to conversation he had with Indo-Guyanese in our party and others outside of our party who he perceive he can speak freely to. And so a lot would have come out. And then, if you have somebody as independent as Terence Campbell, and then you turn around to describe him in the way he described him, as frying chicken, well, the owner of a chicken place doesn't necessarily fry chicken. But if he goes and fry chicken, it shows a certain amount of humility and appreciation for what the workers do. Jack Deo can't do that. Jack Deo and Irfan Ali are contemptuous of ordinary people. There is a picture that is circulating with Irfan where an African Guyanese is like bowing down to him and he's walking, going his business. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, the African Guyanese should not be doing that. But then Irfan himself should not be doing that. So this is all in keeping with the modus operandi of the PPP. Now, I'm looking at the contracts they gave out, and I'll deal with it for the second part of the Diamond Road. And it's like 9 or 10 people, and it is billions of dollars. And judging from the names, it's only one African Guyanese in the bunch. And if my information is true, there's a company there that is allegedly owned by the president. So you see what they're up to, domination and control. If you look at the allocation of contracts in this country, you will see that the billions of dollars go to a small group in the PPP. And then you come and say, there's a mechanism There's a law that says 25% of the contracts in Guyana should go to small contractors. They don't seek to implement that. What they do is go giving contracts like if it is patronage. And by the time they finish giving contracts to the lower sections of the society, they really can't make any money. I remember the bridges in Buxton. Nobody came after more than 200,000. And then some people are saying in this batch that they give, we ain't got to do nothing. The government just want to distribute the money. And then the other thing that is obvious is that they seem to have this view that the people who should be doing cleaning is the African Guyanese. They haven't reserved any other contracts for them. So you've seen a clear racial intent on the part of the PPP. And then what they do is try now to accuse other people of racism when they are acting in a racist way.
Speaking of state boards and state board appointments and working with the opposition, Jagdeo is reported to have said that having opposition appointees to certain institutions will stymie progress. And then came Dr. Terence Campbell's revelations about what manner of progress was being stymied by the presence of opposition nominees to the board. Do you sense that this is an across-the-board situation, and that's why you have not been invited as leader of the opposition to send representatives to several state boards?
I think the government is bent on corruption, and to have representation by anyone who will challenge the government will not be welcomed by the government. And so what the government is doing is seeking to ensure that there is not effective opposition anywhere, so that they can do as they like and continue to obtain large sums of money between themselves, their family, their friends, and favor it. This is not anything about stymieing the work. It is about creating conditions for corruption. The PPP is a corrupt political party, and they want no accountability. To put people in those institutions that demand them, for them, they see it as slowing down or getting rid of the corruption they are involved in.
The recently passed compulsory acquisition of land for public purposes bill, soon to become law, is believed by many to be designed specifically to disinherit descendants of early free slaves in this country. The People's Progressive Party persists that this is the way they want to go. One of the more interesting clauses in this amendment is that you can get an advance payment. However, you have to establish to the satisfaction of the minister that you have title to this land. And we all understand cultural and historical issues relating to ancestral lands. Clearly, there's no reference to the ancestral lands inquiry report. What does the opposition contemplate with regard to the passage of this bit of legislation going forward? Are you going to challenge this?
First, it's a knee-jerk reaction. The people in Peters Hall, in the part of the bridge, challenged the government because the government wants the land. But the government wanted to arbitrarily decide who gets what and how much. And that generated a problem. Now, so at the outset, it is not an attempt to rectify the problems involved in compulsory acquisition. It's an attempt now to say, look, when we want the land, once we want that land, we're taking it. You can now do as you like. Now, the advance is both a positive and a danger. It's a positive in the sense that people will get money, but it's a danger because you have already committed and you might end up not getting what you want. So one has to see it. But the main focus of the government in this document is to ensure that they can get possession of the land, regardless of whether the law is honored or not. And that is where I think the danger lies. Also, the issue of ancestral lands. There are a lot of lands that African Guyanese are entitled to. Their foreparents would have purchased it, etc. And once you don't have clear language that speaks to that, you open a Pandora's box in the sense that the government can take those lands. Now, we have got to be on the alert, and the first time they try it, it has to become a court matter. It has to be challenged in the court. Mind you, nobody's up against compulsory acquisition.
Right.
Compulsory acquisition is part of law everywhere. But one has to be wary of the nature, especially the racist nature of the PPP. The racist nature of the PPP will always raise concerns as it relates to land. And mind you, this is not only land, ancestral lands. A lot of persons got land legally when we were in government. And when the PPP came to power, they use a number of mechanisms to either get back the land or force the people to compromise and give them part. And so what you're seeing is a structured approach by the PPP to put lands in the hands of the family, friends, and favorites. I have mentioned what had happened at Mocha. They tried to confront it, but many people will pass and see that right opposite, they had said, and they're so ridiculous, they continue to say the people who are in the part of the road. Now everybody can see where the road would have passed and see where they are. And they continue to say it, knowing it is not true. And that's the nature of Irfan Ali's PPP. And then right now, when you go right opposite, they have people building, people close to the PPP, building much closer to the road than the people at Mocha were.
What remedies do you see in the Mocha situation? Because
as we work to get government, we have to find a mechanism of restitution. The people who have been affected there should get back their lands and be compensated.
But it was so despicable that people even lost their jobs for standing up for their rights.
Oh yes. One person.
So clearly this had less.
And that is why I say to you, it goes way down to the bottom once you disagree with the government. Now you take a normal clerk inputting information, and because she stood up for her rights, you decide that you have to use ropes and bend the minister to fire her. I mean, it's the nature of the regime. They see no scope for any disagreement with them. Jagdeo believe he's God.
Now, the people of Peters Hall, some of them went to court. The government obviously felt that they should not have been challenged. And as you pointed out, the knee-jerk reaction with this bill. Do you sense that the government is using its executive power to sort of railroad this thing through the legislature in order to go around the judiciary, to cause the judiciary not to have a hand in this unless some extraordinary circumstances occur?
Well, I don't believe they could stop the judicial process. And they don't need to go around. They went with a bulldozer and broke down the people's place. It's the second manifestation, or in recent times, that they are willing to destroy people's property and livelihood to achieve their objective. And like I said, all of these things, one of the things in government, we will set up a restitution institution. And the sole purpose of that institution will be to take in the complaints against the government excesses, regardless of ethnicity, and ensure that justice is done. We cannot continue to have a government that bulldozes, destroy people's life and livelihood, and it goes unpaid for. And so, look, we had the murder of 3 people in Linden, and clearly what is happening here is people being compensated for it.
Subject for another large conversation. In government, what do you intend to do about the findings and recommendations of the Ancestral Lands Commission in relation to what's happening here?
We have got to seek to implement the findings. First, review it, because I do believe that things that happened 5-6 years ago should be reviewed,
right,
because circumstances may have changed. Though a lot of people don't like hear me say review, but we'll have to review it, and then we take the actions to ensure that justice is done and ancestral lands go to the rightful owner rather than being left in limbo for the government to intervene and do the garbage they're doing.
A role for African Guyanese attorneys at law looms large in this regard. Many of the heirs to ancestral lands lack the means to go before the courts to assert their rights to title, and can, in fact, as a consequence, suffer severe hardship, if not be disinherited by this very bit of legislation. Is the party contemplating putting together a pool of lawyers to assist such persons?
It has to, but we have to go deeper than that. Remember when the PPP came to government in 1992, we gave scholarships to all who wanted to do law, regardless of ethnicity.
Yeah.
By the time the PPP was satisfied that sections of its support base had the money to do law, they stopped giving scholarships for law. Now, obviously, that has an ethnic dimension. It targets non-Indians who don't have the means. It also has a political dimension, because there can be Indians who don't have the means, but unless they are with the PPP, they wouldn't be able to.
Mm-hmm.
And so one has to recognize that the PPP in a structured way did a lot to ensure that there is an imbalance in terms of legal representation. It's something people don't want to address, but we have to address it because it's a reality. The government called the PPP consistently ensure that scholarships for law weren't given, and they know the cohorts that will be directly affected by it and the ethnic groups that will be affected by it.
Do you see a need for affirmative action in this or other regard?
I don't like the idea, I don't like the idea of extrapolating affirmative action, which to me is an American thing. But I do believe that moving forward, equity has to be a key principle. I've already said people who are aggrieved and injustice was done should be given redress. And there should be a structured approach to dealing with the inequities in the society so that we produce a much more equal society. If you look at, say, contracts, if this government was serious about removing inequities, they would have taken the recommendation I made of establishing a contractor school in which you get a variety of people reflective of the society, train them, and then ensure that they develop their skills, etc., so that you have a wider cross-section of people involved in contracts. But what they do, they go into Sapphire and give a young African Guyanese a contract. And by the time he get the contract, their friends, families, and favorites come in to say, we can do it. We got the equipment, you ain't got. give us so much money. You think, well, if somebody come and say that to you, and you can get a 2 million or a 3 million, you can take it.
But
You
he makes
got
front
nothing
page.
anyhow.
He makes front page, and that's
Yeah.
the Gobel's approach.
Correct. And so across the country, you see they're doing that. They're not interested in genuine empowerment of people, even in the Indian communities. Because it is reported to me that even some Indians who are not endowed with money, when they get the contract, these same people turn up and the hog of the money is gone to the family, friends, and favorites. So we have got to take a look at this thing totally and take a comprehensive approach to it. It is a function of political and ethnic discrimination.
I want to keep you on contracts for a moment here, Mr. Norton. Bharat Jagdeo. Hello, Mr. Sean Ben, my brother. Congratulations to you on standing firm for the people of South Rhineville. Comrade Sean Ben stood up, publicized what was happening on that road, and graphically reported to the nation on what happened with those electricity poles, the concrete ones. Jagdeo came out, heads must roll, he said, heads must roll. And in so doing, he made reference to the incompetence of some contractors who failed to do the right thing. But it is his government that gave them the contract. That's on the one hand, but what Jagdeo did not speak of is the Bamia School, which is several years past its deadline and still not completed. A contract given to persons in the music and entertainment industry with no experience in that regard. No condemnation, no criticism of that. But here he is trying to appease the population of South Georgetown, which does not support the People's Progressive Party in the face of this kind of
Let me say this.
shoddy works.
Let me say this. Irfan Ali as president and Bharat Jagdeo as God are responsible for what is happening in South Rhineville. In the first place, you mentioned it. They give the contracts in some regard to people who aren't qualified. As we pointed out in a press conference, there appeared to have been no feasibility study.
Clearly, there was none.
No social impact study. So what you have really is an incompetent government. Let's deal with electricity. I think it was 2004 that Bharat Jagdeo said, if there aren't changes in electricity and there's stable current, heads will roll. Irfan Ali repeats the same garbage now.
Yeah.
If there isn't improvement by 2025, heads are going to roll. Yes, in 2025, heads must going to roll. It must be the president head. They should be gotten rid of. Look, GPL was at a place where it was making money. GPL was at a place where under the APNU AFC, we were dealing with the problems of GPL. We brought in a competent manager. That manager was doing what had to be done. The PPP brought back a failed manager that they had contended failed and put him there, and the place went down. Now they're showing you some nepotism. The brother of a minister is there, and the incompetence you're seeing, it was appointed by Irfan Ali. So he cannot come now and saying head gonna roll, except he's starting with his own head. And let's assume that the incompetence was only at the GPL. Who head will roll for the incompetence of this cash grant? Here is it. A government declares, we're going to give you a cash grant. First thing, instantaneously. Second thing, in 5 months. Third thing, we come and say we starting now. And they cannot get it right.
There's no money in the system.
Hold on, we can go to we're going there just now. He should resign because he's incompetent. Incompetent to two levels, in terms of delivering and in terms of having a man below him that is dictating what he does or doesn't do. We understand that there is a shortage of Guyana dollars. In fact, they're bringing out all the $2,000 bill now. You see more $2,000 bill than anything. I heard they're trying to get money in. Yeah, that has its own negative consequences. But what it says is, here is a government that makes an announcement because of the political pressure from us. And they weren't prepared. And so you have now another failed project. And not only that, I want the government to challenge this. On the highway and a part of the East Bank, foreigners got their cash grant, and many Guyanese have not gotten their cash grant. I challenge the government to say Indian nationals didn't get cash grant.
Or Venezuelan nationals.
Or Venezuelan nationals didn't get cash grant. And so you give this cash grant to foreigners even before you give the citizens of Guyana. That is incompetence. And it is not restricted to electricity. Let's go to Gaisuku.
I wanted to go there, but before I do,
okay,
I wanted to ask this question. There appears to be a rift, a massive rift in the leadership of the PPP. Clearly, Bharat Jagdeo is attacking Anil Nandlal when he speaks of heads rolling at GPL. Out comes Irfan Ali and saying that managers, the heads of managers will roll if this place isn't fixed by January. Targeting Nandlal's brother, obviously an incompetent person, but clearly there's that rift that is happening there. Nandlal and his leadership seem to be at loggerheads. Why must internal political strife affect our country and our citizens at this level at Christmas time when electricity is in greater demand?
Because of the absence of leadership on the part of the PPP. Look, I hold no brief for anybody in the PPP, including Anil. But there's a trend in the PPP. Anil comes over as one of the more intelligent ones. And therefore, there's this kind of automatic that he will be in conflict with Jagdeo. It reminds me very much of Navin Chandapal, the late Navin.
Yep.
Who, when you met him, you at least, you could have disagreed with him politically, but you accepted that he had intellectual capacity. And everyone that comes into contact with Jagdeo that has intellectual capacity becomes an enemy and a target. And so I think what you've seen in the PPP, problems emerging because as Bharat Jagdeo seeks to dominate and control, there are intelligent people around, however few they are, that constitute a challenge, and that he doesn't like. Irfan Ali is going to survive as long as he doesn't constitute a challenge. And well, intellectually, they might be on the same level, so there won't be an intellectual challenge.
They're struggling for depth.
Yeah, they're clearly intellectually challenged.
Gaisuku, Mr. Norton, Gaisuku. The People's National Congress and indeed the coalition has been accused of a number of things regarding Gaisuku. Fact of the matter is, Gaisuku produces sugar at $1.30, $1.31 US per pound. Gaisuku sells sugar at 35 to 40 cents per pound. Obviously, if I'm making a roti and it costs me $200, I can't sell it for $75.
You shouldn't, because they're doing it.
Right? So, but they persist with Gaisuku. Now, Gaisuku's production target was somewhere in the region of 70,000 tons. Gao it was, who said that up to October, end of October, Gaisuko had only produced 24,000 tons. But they persist with Gaisuko to the extent that one failed CEO has now been appointed an ambassador to get him out of the way and out of the crosshairs. They're protecting him. So they put a new CEO. And this new CEO has been put on notice by Mr. Irfan Ali. If you don't get Gaisuko right and profitable, your head gonna roll. A lot of head rolling is taking place here. But Gaisuko, Mr. Chung, will never, ever become under the People's Progressive Party viable again. So, Mr. Norton, what is Mr. Ali's mischief in this regard?
Let's go back. We had downsized the Gaisuku because it wasn't viable.
Right.
The PPP went out to campaign on that you had gotten rid of 7,000 to carry up the number,
Yeah.
workers, etc. But they had no plan for Gaisuku. They had the one that they now sent to Brussels, say something, says Narayan, I think is his name.
Says Narayan Singh, I believe it is.
Talking a lot of garbage, and they quietly hustled him out because Gaisuku has failed on him.
And he hasn't accounted yet for the
But let us go
expenditure.
back. Let us go back. The incompetence started on the Jack deal. When the EU was pulling out and removing the concessions, the EU gave to Guyana money
for retooling.
And for totally refocusing the workers, etc. in Gaisuku. Incompetent Jack Dale put it in Skeldon Sugar Factory, which can't produce a pound of sugar or a megawatt of power.
Or 1 kilowatt for that matter.
So what in essence you have is this incompetence started on the Jack deal. With all the noise he's making, he closed down the most sugar estates in this country. And then you come to the point where the EU gave you money and you didn't utilize it properly. Now, the APNU came into government, look at the situation, continued to subsidize Gaisuku, but created a plan to ensure it is smaller, more viable, and not a burden on the nation. Jacques Dion and Irfan Ali campaign on that. They're going to make it viable. I think was in a year, 4 years plus would have passed. And it isn't. And it will not be viable under the PPP because they are incompetent. If any head is to roll for Gaisuko, it should be Irfan Ali's head. He has proven to be incompetent. Zulfikar can't even answer the questions in Parliament. And so the question becomes, where do we go with Gaisuku? But it is not just Gaisuku. It is the communities that rely on the sugar industry. We're saying downsizing is the correct thing to do. But we will organize employment and small businesses for those who are affected as you reduce the impact of sugar. You cannot continue the billions of dollars they are putting into sugar can help to develop alternative industries, small businesses, and create other forms of employment to absorb the workers, first of all in the sugar industry, and to positively impact the communities that rely on the sugar industry. Among my colleagues and in conversation with some people, we have outlined some things we will do to make those communities viable and release them as we campaign. There is no reason why, for instance, they cannot be the development of a modern alternative agricultural program, which we will look at, a modern alternative agricultural program for those communities so that they can help increase production. I said we will do it in all regions, but we will also do it in those regions that are impacted by the failures in the sugar industry. And it will do a number of things. One, it will create employment. It will increase production of agricultural products, which will impact the cost of living. But like I said, I don't know how Irfan Ali or Jack, they could say they understand basic economics. I'm no economist. I read economics, I have to. And I did some economic courses. But they should know that if you move in other directions in agriculture, in agro-processing, you will create employment. And then you will increase the supply of agricultural products in the society, which will help to stabilize prices and help you with the high cost of living. But they are doing none of that. They are in fact fueling the high cost of living.
This business of sugar, I remember when Guyana lost its preferential sugar price. I remember when the European Union said, look, we'll give you money to retool and to become more efficient and cost effective. We know that the sugar cane that goes into Gaisuco, 1/3 of it is produced by private cane farmers, 2/3 by Guyana Sugar Corporation field staff. That retooling money, the private cane farmers never benefited from it. Not even a proper road, not even an improved dam to get their stuff there, the sugar cane to the factory. And you pointed out where the money went. Now, Gaisuco decided, the People's Progressive Party decided that with Barbados going out of sugar, Trinidad going out of sugar, Cuba reducing its production, focusing on domestic consumption and so on, they were going to fill this void created by these countries coming out of export sugar production. But Brazil in this year, 2023-24, produced 705 million metric tons of sugar. Guyana could barely muster 24,000 tons. But yet we brag about being able to take up, the PPP brags about being able to take up the slack from these countries. I mean, how can the People's Progressive Party sustain this argument in the face of world realities?
They don't intend to sustain any argument. They are propagandists. They believe they say it, and the supporters will believe it. It's just like I had to deal with.
That's mental abuse, is it not?
It's just like I had to deal with Barry Jagdale saying I get 1.8 million and show people my payslip and say that doesn't happen.
Yes, saw that.
Now, let's deal with them. They're talking about food security and talking a lot of garbage. They are importing chicken from Brazil. Rather than ensuring the chicken industry in this country progresses. And I've said before, the state is linked to it. Senior PPP officials are linked to it and ensure that customs and the police turn a blind eye. Therefore, right away, you're challenging local chicken production. Eggs is the same thing. Beef is the same thing. There was a time when we had a thriving cattle industry. And the government can do more, especially in the Rupununi, with proper planning, to revitalize the cattle industry, which I gather was being done under us.
Yep.
But they go on the same road. So it is not a case of them trying to deliver. They believe that the words they speak, however untrue they are, will be believed. And so I always say they are propagandists. They will repeat a lie 100 times with the hope that it will become the truth. And so there is no proper plan for agriculture, generally, much less sugar as a separate product. This government is in crisis. Electricity in crisis, sugar in crisis, agriculture in crisis, water in crisis. Under the APN UAFC, people were getting 24/7 water. Plus, they were getting a much better quality of water. This government has come and GWI has become a mess. Whose head will roll for that nonsense they build calling heroes highways? Whose head will roll for that? Whose head will roll for all the substandard work they're doing across this country? Whose head will roll for us not having a structured approach to the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy? I said to President Irfan, and I said in my speech to Parliament, that we needed to have an organized public relations campaign on the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy, which the president agreed to then. We said that there is need for structured work with the international community so that we build support. They did absolutely nothing, and now that Venezuela has built a bridge to Ankoko, our vulnerabilities are increasing. And so it is incompetence on the part of the government, even in foreign policy. Whose head should roll? Irfan Ali. He has proven to be incompetent.
I have a very critical question on this territorial controversy. Given the bridge has been constructed and declared open, that bridge connects Venezuela to Guyana's half of Ankoko. The Bolivarian government has passed relevant laws annexing, for want of a better expression, Essequibo to their country, making it an additional state, amending their flag to include another star representing Essequibo as their territory. They have appointed a governor, a military official. They have approved in Parliament a budget. They have decreed that they will suspend licenses that from operating in Essequibo that do not conform to their rules and regulations and laws and so on. This bridge, in the face of all of that, what does this mean for our sovereignty? What does it mean for our territorial integrity?
It's a direct threat to our territorial integrity and sovereignty. It's also a manifestation that the government has done no proper foreign policy analysis, because the government failed to recognize that from the time that referendum was passed, it was a different configuration. For the first time in the history, you were seeing direct, aggressive attempts on our land. The government sat back, not recognizing the implications. The government isn't even preparing the Ghana Defense Force to even help in that little area. My understanding is they have watered down the training in the Ghana Defense Force, making our territory vulnerable to Venezuela. And so, as I understand it as well, Brazil plays an important role in terms of ensuring Venezuela don't come through from there.
Yeah.
And this side is where the heavy terrain is.
Yes.
And if you allow Venezuela to increase
Traffic through that terrain.
traffic through that terrain, you are in fact giving up our territory. I don't know if that is so complex for Fanali to understand. But he seems not to understand anything that is a little complex.
I ask that question because I get a sense that we are in really difficult times. There's a creeping invasion as I see it. There's a large body of migrant Venezuelans in Guyana. And more recently, there was the claim that the president of this country invited a Venezuelan Warao and his people to visit him at his office, and a claim. There's a report from a top military official who is aide-de-camp to the president, as alleged, which says that these people actually visited State House, and they were accorded some treatments at some place called a One Guyana Kitchen, wherever that is. These people have been persistent, Mr. Norton. It is alleged that they were taken to Perico to go back to Essequibo. It was alleged that they were never invited in the first place. It is alleged that they returned days later. Another political party became involved in trying to find some kind of comfort for them. And then that political party stood accused of abandoning them. But to me, this is a very subtle attempt at accessing the presidential palace, as the Venezuelans will call it. I am uncomfortable and I feel unsecured as a citizen of this country in the face of government inaction in this regard.
I will tell you what I think. Clearly, Irfan Ali is trying to play populist politics. He wants to be popular about everything. And I have a sneaky suspicion that he did meet the man.
There's a picture to that effect.
And invited him, first thing. And he chose not to speak. He put the aide-de-camp. The aide-de-camp should not be speaking on a critical issue like that.
Or at all.
At all. No. I believe after he invited them, he then got intelligence information that suggested that they could have been people who were seeking to penetrate Guyana. So by the time he invited them to town, they had to change them out. Now, if it's a case where you didn't invite them at all, why you felt obligated to help them, which might very well be a signal.
And there are two other ministries with that responsibility.
Correct. They got the immigration element, the migration element,
the social protection.
Well, I love social protection.
Amerindian affairs.
I would say if they are migrants, they should have been dealt with by the relevant government agency and the International Migration Organization. But that the president entangled himself. I was called and asked to take a position on the abandonment of them. And I said to the two persons that called me, look, unless I have an intelligence report that says these people are not part of Venezuela's scheme against Guyana, I will not become involved. I believe as political leaders, we shouldn't seek popularity over everything, because we might very well cause what happened to happen there. Your popularity stunt turn into an action against you. People had said to me when the Venezuela thing emerged, oh, we should go into this area and engage people and do the X, Y, and Z. Those are government responsibilities.
Yeah.
And as political parties, if we have political sense, if we have political acumen, we should not get caught in those kinds of activities. I have said I am supportive of the government and people of Guyana in dealing with the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. But I will not become involved in any wildcat scheme that could jeopardize the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Guyana.
But there's one particular element of this group that to me was alarming. Here was a man who claimed to be invited by the president and who surrounded himself with women and children and attempted to access State House or the office of the president, as the case might be. That to me is troubling because women and children have always been used as shields, body shields, in certain methods of engagement. And I believe that Mr. Ali failed on this one again.
Well, to say he failed again is normal. Look, I believe it's a complex national security issue and it should be handled as such. I think President Ali has erred. The relevant ministries have erred, and there is need to rectify it. There is need for a well-structured approach to the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy that puts a halt to the actions of Venezuela as it relates to our territory.
You had called for a bipartisan parliamentary committee on this matter. What's the position with that?
But the government rejected it out of hand.
And do you intend to persist with this call, or?
I intend to, but I'm not optimistic that the government, like I said earlier, government doesn't want to create any space. They don't want any challenge. As far as they're concerned, it must be total domination and control by them.
Given that this is a national problem, this is a situation that affects the life and livelihood of every citizen, current and future, would an appeal to the people of this country in that regard not be appropriate?
Well, there should not have been an appeal. There should have been a consistent. I call in my parliamentary speech, and when I spoke to President Irfan Ali, I said to him, there is need for a continuous, comprehensive education program in Guyana that keeps this issue in focus. The second element I'd place, we need to send envoys and have our missions overseas do consistent political work to sensitize people so that we have a support both at home and at the international level. The government's approach is to, when they think there's a little excitement, they come out, talk some garbage, and then they go back. Clearly, Irfan Ali does not understand foreign policy.
We're 10 minutes over time. We'll go for perhaps another 5 minutes with Mr. Norton. Keeping you on this issue, it is clear that the government of Guyana, the president of Guyana, is at a loss as to who are his friends in this matter and on whom he can count. He is clearly leaning on Ralph Gonsalves and Mia Motley, and it is evident that these two heads of state have their own special arrangements with the government of Venezuela, as too is the case, I believe, with Trinidad and Tobago having recently entered into a similar agreement. With the CARICOM and its founding fathers, Guyana being one of them, what can Guyana do? What do you intend to do as president of this country to bring CARICOM back to where it was and to reassert the support of CARICOM on issues of this nature?
You have to develop a clear vision of regional integration at this point of time. That's your first thing. Your second thing, you have to consistently engage Caribbean leaders based on that vision and where you're headed. In that process, you have to keep them abreast with what is happening in the Ghana-Venezuela territorial controversy. You cannot allow Venezuela to be in the forefront. Previously, you could have said you didn't have money. You now have the resources to develop a robust foreign policy approach. I did say to the president and in the public domain that we need to develop material and put it in the Latin American newspapers, because a lot of people in Latin America never heard of the Arbitral Award of 1899. They never did anything. So to me, you have a government that doesn't understand its role. It doesn't know what it is doing. When it comes to allies, you build allies. Brazil, of necessity, must be an ally. Suriname must be an ally, at least on this issue, because you also have problems with, what you call it, with Suriname. Well, I shouldn't say be an ally. They should be engaged. You need to work on more allies in the Caribbean. You should say to Gonzalez, you are a maverick. When Gonzalez could make a statement like Venezuela is a friend of Guyana, and Guyana got better gain with Maduro in power, some statement to that effect, you clearly seen a man that does not have the interests of Guyana at heart. Venezuela is an adversary who wants Guyana's territory and should be treated as such. And so the failure of the government of Guyana is affecting us. We need a strategic approach to the Caribbean, CARICOM. We need one to Latin America. We also need to meet out to Africa and Asia, where we are engaging Europe through the European Union, etc. But this is a matter in which one of your first allies should be small, vulnerable states. You should be engaging states in Africa at minimum, so they are knowledgeable of the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy. When I spoke with a certain vice president in Africa, it was like news. That shouldn't be. Every African state, every Asian state, every South American state should be made aware that the Arbitral Award of 1899 settled the issue and other information to support the argument. If you rely solely on the International Court of Justice, and we must rely on them, but we have got to create the environment that whenever the announcement is made in our favor, there is a world disposed to working with us. And there is where we are failing.
Thank you for that, Mr. Norton. I want to end on a maybe lighter but equally profound note. You mentioned before we got to this last topic, the whole question of meats, chicken and beef coming from Brazil. We, as a nation of consumers, are unaware of whether chicken coming from Brazil is satisfying the food safety standards that we have here in Guyana under the Ministry of Health. We do not know if the meats being transported are transported in a safe and hygienic manner, and we'll show you how some of it is being transported. We do not know if there are legitimate import permits for these meats. And we don't know the circumstances under which they're prepared in Brazil, and whether the duration of transit could in any way cause health risks for us as a people. And we're going to show you, Mr. Norton, how chicken is being transported to Georgetown. This truck was stuck in the mud. It is not a refrigerated truck. I don't know how it passed the checkpoints, but there it was en route to Georgetown, and it's packed with frozen chicken. And the bit of frost you see there is not being generated by the truck itself. It is emerging from the meats which were frozen. So your perspective on this matter, and how do you intend as president of this country to treat with the issue of foreign trade and safety, food safety particularly in Guyana?
The government doesn't care anything about the safety of the Guyanese people. In fact, I have said senior government officials are linked to that illegal trade. So they don't have to get any permission. All they got to do is get people to turn a blind eye, and it comes true. But there's a wider issue. Let me give you the foreign trade one first. We will appoint a proper trade minister that seeks to ensure that Guyana's trade subscribes both export and import. They subscribe to international standards and meet the standards for health, etc. I believe that a small country like Guyana, international trade is important for standards and also for a minister and a ministry that are looking for opportunities in trade. We lack that at present. The other critical issue with all this chicken and egg and things that are coming, we are talking local content. Don't tell me local content is a foreign company buying a foreign chicken from Guyanese. The local content of that is extremely low. If we are serious about local content, we want to develop the industries that could feed the health sector. We should be putting money into expanding poultry production, chicken, pigs, you name it. We should be putting money into our agricultural production, our crops, so that more of what foreign companies are buying are produced in Guyana. Then we start to talk serious local content. What local content there is, if a businessman imports everything and sell it to Exxon, the local content is minimal. What you have is a local company taking foreign products and selling it. But it doesn't go to the root of local content, ensuring that a large percentage of what these companies buy are produced in Guyana, either in part or totally. And that is what we will seek to rectify.
There is a report in the public domain regarding 30,000 eggs that were damaged and could not have been hatched. Many people you speak with out there on the street who know of this will tell you that it is their view that this was deliberate, a sabotage to the local industry to facilitate what we just saw there. And to facilitate the issuance of license for imports in some cases, and as you said, the turning of blind eyes in other cases. This does not help local industry. This hurts the local industry, and it exposes our citizens, the citizens of this country, to massive health risks. And maybe we should be warning our citizens, particularly in the coastal area of Guyana, to be very mindful of what you buy when it comes to meats.
We should be. But let me say this, it is deeper. In me talking with people in the poultry sector, they're complaining that even the chickens are not properly vaccinated.
Right.
And that they are experiencing high heavy loss.
Mortality rate is
Mortality
extremely
rate
high.
is extremely high.
Yeah.
And many of them are of the view that the government is involved because in terms of not ensuring these things happen, because those who bring them from overseas benefit significantly, and they see the development of the local poultry industry as a threat to the mantra money you have to make. That's the reality.
Well, it'll be useful to hear from Bounty Farm and so on, who have been in this industry for decades. And there is word out there that one particular high-ranking government official is into poultry in a very, very large way. And therefore, well, wouldn't be the only one, but therefore mechanisms will be put in place to promote.
My
their own
understanding
undertaking.
also that that's also a conflict,
It certainly is.
because the Minister of Agriculture and the particular person
Yes.
have their own battles over that. I understand that.
And there's the element of seniority and all that involved.
Yeah.
Mr. Norton, I'd like to thank you very much for taking time out and for agreeing to go over time, although we didn't discuss it. And I'll give you this opportunity. I know you have your usual message to the nation, but to give you this opportunity to speak to all of us as we approach the Christmas season. Well, the Christmas day, in fact. We're in the season already.
Thanks for having me. Let me start by saying this. Guyana has money. Many of the things you see are happening as a result of money, not of competence. The problems you see are the problems of competence. The government, even with all this money, is proven to be incompetent. And Guyanese must recognize that this will only be an exercise in waste of money. The government shows no ability to implement successful projects. They do not have at their disposal one successful project. Everything they touch turns to
Flushable material.
correct language for describing it. So I want to say to the Guyanese people, let us be sensible. Let not be carried away by incompetent distributing money all over the place, but do not have programs to take you out of poverty. The real issue in Guyana is the need for a government with policies and programs that are going to take you out of poverty. We in the APNU are saying we can do that. The evidence is that the government can't, even with billions of dollars. Infrastructure is only one manifestation of it. Poor electricity, another manifestation. Gaisuko, another manifestation. And if we continue to give the manifestations, we won't leave here. So I'll take the opportunity to wish all Guyanese a Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Norton. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for today. Although we've gone over time, we thank you for staying with us. Until we meet again, have a Merry Christmas and God bless you all.